Hi, my name is Alan, and I married my nanny. I was raised by a widowed, overprotective father. My mom passed away when I was really young, and that affected my dad deeply. He had lost his wife and felt like he could lose me as well any second. He wouldn't let me go out after school, and he would be wary of any friends I made, worried they would be a bad influence on me. So I grew up in this bubble, where everything was pristine and safe, but incredibly boring and monotonous. I went to school, came back, did my homework, played by myself, and went to bed. The worst part about it all was that my dad wasn't even around most of the time. You see, my father is a very successful shop owner and a bit of a workaholic. He cares deeply about me, I'm not going to deny that, but at the same time, he was rarely in my life at all. He told me that he needed to provide for me, but we had more than enough money to live comfortably without him working so hard. He lost himself in his job most of the time, and I respect his work ethic, but I still needed him around. So to make up for the fact that he was never there to protect me, he hired nannies. I didn't have any uncles, aunts, or grandparents, so it was always only dad and myself after mom died. I barely remember her at all. She got sick when I was 5 and was gone before I turned 6. There are still plenty of pictures of her around the house, so at least I get to know how she looked like. Mom was really pretty, and everyone says I have her eyes, which is nice. Every day when I got home from school, I'd be greeted by a nanny. Dad wasn't there, and I'd have some milk and cookies and then do my homework. Sometimes the nannies would keep me company and play games with me. Other times they would just look at me from another side of the room and read a magazine or something while they kept an eye on me. It depended on the nanny, and there were some I liked more than others. They kept changing since my dad didn't trust anyone for too long. As you might have guessed, Dad was a bit paranoid when it came to my care. He was certain something was going to happen to me at any given moment. He wouldn't let me cross the street alone until I was well into puberty, and would never let me go outside and play on my own. Going to sleepovers or parties was a big no-no, even if other adults were around. So you can imagine I had a really hard time making friends at all. I felt so isolated all the time. I would beg my dad to allow me to bring schoolmates over, but he rarely said yes. I could only do it if he was around, and he worked so hard that it rarely happened at all. He'd get home to have dinner with me, but by that time, I couldn't exactly invite a friend over. It was too late in the evening already. When I entered puberty, my dad took a greater responsibility at his job, as he opened several stores around the country. That meant he had to fly often to other states and leave me alone for several days at a time. That was when the nannies began spending a whole lot more time at our home, sleeping over often. Most of them were older, around my dad's age, and they were usually very strict and distant. He seemed to pick those kinds of nannies so they wouldn't be too permissive and allow me to get away with stuff he had forbidden me from doing. When I turned 15, I sat down with my dad to have a real heart-to-heart with him. I told him I felt I was old enough to take care of myself when he wasn't around, and that it was weird for me to keep having nannies. I asked him to let me go out with friends once in a while. He refused, which really frustrated me, but agreed that I didn't need professional nannies any longer. He could agree to hire someone a bit more relaxed, as long as I agreed to follow his rules. It was not what I had hoped for, but it was something, so I agreed. That was when I met Lisa, the love of my life. Lisa was 21 when my dad hired her. She was a college student and the daughter of one of his employees. She was incredibly pretty and had the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. I had just turned 16 a week ago and couldn't believe I still was forced to have a nanny, but having her around made it better. We got along really well, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel so alone. I would actually look forward to getting back from school. Before, I had to be all on my own, without friends and with a strict old woman who'd barely talk to me at all but keep a watchful eye on me. Now, I got to talk and laugh with the prettiest girl I had ever seen. I think it really was love at first sight. I could barely stop smiling whenever she was around. I still remember our first kiss vividly. We were sitting on the couch, laughing about some random joke, and she leaned in closer to me. I couldn't help myself and kissed her. I really expected her to get angry and scold me, but instead, Lisa kissed me back. It was incredible. I hugged her tightly and we began making out. My dad wouldn't arrive until much later, so we knew there was no risk of getting caught. Lisa was the most incredible woman I've ever met. She was studying to be a nurse, and she was incredibly smart and kind-hearted. I know it was wrong for her to have a relationship with me when I was young, and she was in charge of taking care of me. But she didn't do it to mess with me or my dad. We really did fall in love. The truth of the matter was, though, that it didn't matter if we were in love or not. I was still young, and my dad didn't even want me dating girls my age. If he found out we were involved, he would have flipped out. We knew my dad was more than capable of calling the cops and getting Lisa in a whole lot of trouble. That night, when I went to bed, all I could think about was how soft her lips were, how perfect she was. But the following morning, reality set. No matter how much I loved her, I knew we were doing something wrong. So at first, we tried not to kiss again. We had this long conversation, and I have to admit that I cried a bit because I really liked her. But it made sense. It was better if we remained good friends. For a while, we managed to be just that. She was my nanny. She'd help me with my homework. We'd talk for hours and hours, or just chill out and watch a fun movie. It was so perfect. I had a friend in my life and I could actually hang out with her without my father freaking out. He trusted her even when he didn't let me go out with any people my age. But after a while, it became impossible to ignore our feelings for one another, and we began dating behind my dad's back. We'd cuddle together when my dad wasn't in town, have romantic dinners, and even go out to the movies. Dad would have killed us if he discovered we left the house unsupervised. But he was completely blind to what was happening. Lisa and I dated for over a year when we decided that this was really serious. We weren't going to just split when she stopped being my nanny. We wanted to be together forever. So when I was 17, I proposed to her, and she said yes. We knew we couldn't get married or even tell anyone about our relationship until I turned 18, but we were willing to wait. She was definitely worth it. The months slipped by slowly, too slowly. I couldn't wait for my birthday to arrive, and to finally be able to leave for college and tell the world about my love for Lisa. I would be free to live my life as well, away from my father's overprotectiveness. I was more than ready to leave my house, to live on campus, to go out to parties and live like a normal young man should, instead of always being locked up inside. The first problem came when I was accepted into college. Dad wanted me to go to a closer university, so I could stay home while I studied. I refused, explaining I wanted to go to my college of choice. He told me that he wouldn't pay for it if that was the case. I completely freaked out. I finally stood up to him and told my dad he couldn't continue to protect me this way all my life. The following months were complicated. We'd argue most of the time we were together. Lisa was my rock, a real support through that hell. Finally, though, the moment arrived. I turned 18 and finished high school. Lisa and I decided it was time to let my dad know about our relationship. You can't even imagine how much my father freaked out. He called Lisa all kinds of names and forbade me from ever seeing her again. I told him I was an adult now and he couldn't tell me who to date, not any longer. My dad then used the last tool he had to manipulate me. He told me he'd take me out of his will and he wouldn't pay a cent of my college education or help me financially at all. Dad told me he loved me, but he knew what was best and that I had to listen to him. I refused to live under his thumb any longer and left my home that very night. I moved in with Lisa and soon after got a job. Dad refused to help me out at all and told me I could return home whenever I was ready to apologize and dump my girlfriend. Lisa and I got married soon after, and my dad didn't come to the wedding. She was 4 months pregnant when we tied the knot, and when my father found out about it, he completely lost his mind. But since I was an adult, there was nothing he could do about it. Dad hasn't met his grandchild yet, and only ever calls me to ask if I'm ready to come to my senses. He claims the only way he'll ever be in my life again is if I get a divorce. He's even willing to take in his grandson, but not until I abandon Lisa. Of course, that is never going to happen. I have a beautiful family, and my in-laws are amazing. I got a scholarship thanks to my great grades, and I plan on being a good provider for Lisa and our baby. I know the way we began our relationship wasn't right, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for watching. Did you ever get into a big argument with your parents? Leave a comment and tell us about it. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel.